Kim Mooney is the founder of Practically Dying. It's a consulting firm that focuses on end of life. She also has decades of experience in hospice care. Kim, thank you so much for coming in. So you are helping with the implementation of the new medical aid in dying law with a lot of doctors and practitioners. What are you hearing from these different doctors? What kinds of questions do they have?
No, I think the reason that this is still feels like it's so much on hold is that people are trying to figure out, what does the involvement actually look like? What's going to come out of my mouth? What is my liability? And that's a lot, because right now what we're asking them to do is something that they've never done before. So I think we're going to see a lot more doctors, a lot more hospices, a lot more organizations opt in a little bit later, but right now they've got to kind of hold their ground.
Have they read the law? Or do you find, or is it just something that they're getting from word of mouth?
I think both. I think very few people have actually sat down and read the law, but certainly all these organizations have their attorneys involved and their ethics committees and boards of directors.
Sure. You also have so much experience with hospice care, and one of the big questions through this process, the Hospice Association didn't really take a stance on this bill, didn't oppose it, didn't support it necessarily, was just kind of neutral. Where are hospices on this issue right now? Are we going to start seeing hospices prescribing the medication and helping families through end-of-life care?
I hope so. I think at this point they're like everybody else. They're sort of waiting to see what's happening, but if we're lucky, the bulk of all this will happen in hospice. I would like to see 100% of it, because this is where dying people are going to get the most support they need for however they're going to die. And it will support their families. The whole system is designed to do exactly this. So I think at some point we'll see more hospices opt in, but I can understand their reticence right now because it is a huge paradigm shift for them.
Why is that?
For as long as hospice has been in existence, our byline, what we've always said is, we will neither hasten nor hinder death. So we're actually saying we're only going to walk you along the natural, your natural dying process. And so for both medical people and systems and hospices now, they're going to have to redefine what excellent patient-centered care means and what it means to take somebody all the way through the journey to the end of their life in circumstances that they never thought they'd have to deal with before.
Well, since the tenets of hospice are not to hasten or hinder death, do you practically see a lot of them going against that and changing the tenets of hospice to begin with?
I think that what I hope and I would say is that has been the way that they have translated that, just like the medical establishment has always translated "we only heal" into their operating systems. And I think now we're at a place where those things are going to have to shift, and I think they should shift. So I believe hospices, because I think what everybody really wants to do, if they can get out of a fear zone or an ignorant zone or whatever zone they're in, is that they want to provide patients with care that matches their needs and goals. So clearly some of this is, we want to eliminate from the people who are asking for this law, there are some people who are clinically depressed, and getting them on the right medication, they're glad to not die. So there are safeguards built into the law to make sure that we continually sort of sift through the requests to make sure that the people for whom this is really appropriate are going to get it, and that the people who may or may not be looking for help, and this is all they know to ask, can get the help other places. That is hospice's main goal. So I think once we get past the subject matter, we're going to get back into the heart of what everybody's doing, and I'm hoping that at that point there'll be a lot more ease with it, a lot more comfort.
You supported this initiative when it was on the ballot.
Yes, I did.
Why was that?
I personally, I know this is trite to say this, but we treat our dogs better than we do our people. And it comes up a lot, but the truth is that there are a lot of people who are suffering, and hospice is a really good support, but there are people for whom it's not appropriate. And so after seeing people die for a really long time and watching what I would say is a good death for them and not, there are some people that this is really the way that they want their life to go. And far be it from me to tell them that they can't. So when people who are opposed to it call it physician-assisted suicide, people who are for it called it physician aid in dying, even that language gets really loaded. I don't believe that people who are at the point of their life when they know it's time to go, when their bodies are in great pain, or they're completely, one more thing I'll say is that the word dignity got co-opted by everybody. Each side said, death with dignity, there's death with dignity without this. The truth is, dignity is whatever the person chooses it to be, whatever they say it is. So if you're in a situation where your death is coming up and it's imminent and everybody knows it, and you want to avoid certain situations, or you want to make sure that certain things happen, I don't see a reason why we can't move toward understanding that. So I don't think it's all here. I think literally we are a paradigm shift in our entire culture.
You talk about the polarization of this issue. You were either opposed to it or you supported it. There really weren't too many people in the middle. How long do you think it'll take before that kind of evens out and it isn't such a polarizing issue anymore? You
mean around the country or just in Colorado?
Around the country or here in Colorado.
You know, I think two things. One of the polarizations really, and this happens with all of end-of-life care, is it depends on whether you're thinking about it theoretically or whether you're actually dealing with a person. Because once you've had a family member who's been in intractable pain, you want everybody in hospice. Once you've had a family member who's dealt with this, or someone you know, then I think that's what's going to shift opinions. And I, of course, think we should shift toward the more liberal. I mean, I'm not going to hide that. So the stories that have been covered in the newspaper, they make a huge difference, because instead of it being a nice theoretical discussion, you start to hear the outcome. You start to hear how people's lives have changed, almost always for the positive, you know, and that's what's really going to, I think, shift things, is when we start to hear, this worked. Oh, that man talked about this. And then when it gets more personal. That's what I think is going to happen. Your whole focus with Practically Dying is to change people's feelings and opinions on death. Because right now death is this big, scary thing that no one really thinks about too often because it's so scary. What are you trying to accomplish through the course of that? I think what I would say, again, after having seen so many people at end of life, there are ways, and I don't mean to sound too poetic about this, but there are ways that the end of your life can be a pretty powerful culmination of your whole life. If you can move toward it, if you can live with the same values as you're dying that you did when you were living. That's all this advanced care planning is designed to elicit, who you are, so that we can find ways to help you die a death that is not only in resonance to how your whole life has been, but to make sure that this is a legacy for your family. They're going to tell these stories. This is going to change who they are. For a long time, death is this thing. You get dropped off a cliff. You know, and medical establishment hasn't been able to support you because they don't have those skills, either emotionally or practically. My goal would be that we start talking about this upstream, that we have small discussions where it's pretty fascinating and interesting. And I know we've talked about this, but most people are fascinated by little bits of death. We look at, you know, death traditions around the world. We look at I don't know, animal stories. Anything is fair game, and anything's interesting until it is about you. And that's the line on the continuum. So death cafes, places where you can just sit and have casual conversation, most people really enjoy it. But when I turn around and say, okay, Steve, let's talk about you, that's the line where all of a sudden it goes back into the monolith and people don't want to go there. Sure. Kim, how can people find you? My website is practically-dying.com. And my phone number is 720-434-5942. But the website's probably the best place, practically-dying.com. Kim Mooney, thank you so much. We have a long way to go with this issue. I'm sure we'll be talking quite a bit. Thanks so much. Take care.